We're going to continue our talk about addictions and alcohol addiction in this case. Claudia Christian, who you can see here in our screen, is joining us, a well-known actress, Babylon 5 and all that. And well, Claudia, you've been very frank about your addictions and the ways over it, and this has a Manx link, so we'll come to that in a second. But can you give us a bit of the background? I mean, because your story is quite a challenging one.
I was a very light drinker in my 20s and a normal drinker in my 30s, just socially. And somewhere around my late 30s, it started to progress into alcohol use disorder. So I quit drinking, and that triggered what is now known as the alcohol deprivation effect, which means that my brain was craving ethanol, alcohol. So when I relapsed after a bout of sobriety, I became a binge drinker. And that lasted until probably from about 37, 38 until about 43 when I found TSM. And in between those years, I would remain abstinent for a period of time and then relapse. And the relapses became progressively worse. So it was very difficult to maintain any really substantial amount of sobriety. I think I lasted one time for 11 months, but I never made it to a year.
But you never thought you were going to be an alcoholic. I mean, I watched your TED talk, and this is what scares, I think, me and everybody else, that you think you're okay, but then you realise you're the last one standing at the bar, I think is how you put it.
Well, yes, I was always the last. I just wanted more. It's just you don't have an off button anymore, and it's because your tolerance level has become so high. And then when you do binge, you can drink yourself to either death or to incredible sickness, which is what would happen to me. I would literally get alcohol poisoning and then stop and then have to withdraw and detox. And it was just brutal. It was a horrible life. I was always being told by what I call the lizard brain. And I do want to say something about vernacular. A lot of people get offended by the word alcoholism or addiction or addict, all these labels that produce shame and stigma. The reason why I continue to use some of these terms is simply because it's just easier to communicate with people and use layman's terms. But the medical term for this is alcohol use disorder, and addict is a shameful moniker, but it's kind of difficult to find another word to use. So yes, I understand it's a brain disorder. I also label it a disease because it's progressive and it can kill you and it's treatable. So for me, those are all the hallmarks of a disease. In any event, I realized that there was also a psychological component to this, and that was that the lizard part, the addict part of my brain, was telling me that I was fine. So after 6 months of sobriety, it's perfectly okay to have a glass of wine because you've just had 6 months of sobriety. That's the insidious nature of addiction. That is really the insidious thing that people can't really put their finger on until they experience addiction. It's like you cannot tell an anorexic, just eat something, because it's not reasonable. There's nothing reasonable about having your brain hijacked by this condition. In fact, it is so unreasonable that you really feel like you're not even in your body. It's bizarre. I said in my documentary, One Little Pill, you know, who was that person that was driving me to the supermarket at 6 o'clock in the morning to buy liquor? I mean, that's just, it wasn't me. It was as if some sort of alien got in my body and hijacked me. And I think that's it's an experience that you really don't comprehend until you walk the walk of addiction. And then you get it. Then you say, oh, that's why that fellow gambled away his college funds for his kids. Oh, that's why that woman keeps throwing up after a meal. You can't control it because it's not reasonable.
Well, sobriety didn't work there, but you came across the Sinclair method, and this has the Isle of Man connection because the daughter lives here on the Isle of Man, and you rave about this. Can you tell us exactly how it works in your case?
So there's an opiate antagonist which is FDA approved, and in the UK actually the NHS was using its sister drug called nalmefene. They called it the anti-binge drinking pill. Well, there's 3 opiate antagonists that are utilized in addiction medicine. That's naloxone, which is used for overdoses from opiate addiction or opiate overdose. Nalmefene, which is predominantly used in the UK and Europe, and naltrexone, which is used in the US and now also in the UK. They're all sister drugs. What naltrexone and nalmefene do, they are opiate antagonists. So right now, there are still doctors that prescribe it with abstinence, but by prescribing these opiate antagonists with abstinence, you're not blocking the behavior you want to control or stop, i.e. drinking. So when you engage in the behavior that you want to stop, whether it be online addiction, pornography, gambling, alcohol drinking, excessive alcohol drinking, you introduce that behavior to an opiate blocker. So what happens is suddenly you don't get the reinforcement of that behavior, the endorphin reward from that behavior. So when you drink on naltrexone, for example, you will enjoy the taste of the glass of wine or the beer. You'll enjoy the camaraderie with your buddies, but suddenly you have an off button. After a couple of beers, you're like, well, you know what, I'm full. Yeah. And I don't really need any more alcohol. I'd rather have a cup of tea.
And that's what you're doing. You could actually have a glass of wine with this pill and felt nothing.
Well, I didn't feel the compulsion to suddenly to become obsessive about how much wine was left in the bottle, how much I was going to drink, can I have more? All of that, the mind games went away. Not overnight, by the way. This was a process. I mean, for me, I was really fortunate. At about 3.5 months, I started really seeing a profound change. I mentioned in my TED Talk that it was a billboard that really struck me, that my brain was healed because the billboard no longer triggered me to want to drink. It was a billboard with a large glass of wine on it. And normally I would drive by it and think, oh, wow, I'd love to have a drink. And that time, after 3.5 months on the Sinclair Method, I drove by it and just went, oh, there's a billboard with a glass of wine on it. So the Sinclair Method is targeted use of naltrexone or nalmefene. And that's the difference is in the Sinclair Method, you are actively drinking with the medication in your bloodstream and brain. So you take the tablet, you wait an hour for naltrexone or 2 hours for nalmefene, then you drink. And it sounds counterintuitive to most people to say, well, how can you tell a person with an alcohol issue to drink alcohol? It's the only way that it really works because you're unlearning the behavior. It's like Pavlov's dog in reverse. You're engaging in the behavior that you're compulsive about, but every drink you take on an opiate antagonist is another session towards extinction. So every time you drink on it, you're unlearning that compulsive behavior to want more. I always compare it to sort of a dragon in your brain. Every time you drink on naltrexone, you're actually making that dragon a little bit smaller. And the thing is, and this is the really key point, is this is a lifetime commitment.
Ah, right. I was going to ask you, will you ever be cured as such?
This is a lifetime commitment. So once you reach extinction and your drinking levels are down to where you're comfortable and it's a healthy drinking amount, or you quit altogether, once you do that, you can never drink again without taking naltrexone or nalmefene first. You cannot do that because you will relearn the behavior.
Claudia, it's been fascinating talking to you. Your documentary, is that available on Netflix or somewhere where the UK audience, Isle of Man, can get it?
One Little Pill is available on Amazon if you're a Prime member. Yeah. It's Prime member. It's also on Tubi and I believe Hulu. So you can find it. You can also rent it from www.onelittlepillmovie.com.
And you're still very passionate about this subject. I can see that you're very passionate to pass on your experiences.
I'm passionate about it because it works for almost 80% of the people who try it, and 3.3 million people are dying every year from alcohol use disorder and alcohol misuse and alcohol-related causes. So we need to nip this in the bud. And if 78% of those people could get better, the world would be a profoundly better place. And this is inexpensive. It's available over insurance, and it's smack easy to do. You can do it at home. You don't have to go to rehab. You don't have to take meetings. You don't have to admit that you're powerless or an alcoholic. You can just take this tablet, carry on with life, and within a few months, you'll notice your drinking has decreased.